Cops of Reddit. A lot of people get jumpy and try to act normal around law enforcement. How can you tell genuinely suspicious people from self conscious idiots acting weird? Story 1. UK police officer here. There is no single factor, but here are a few things I'd look for. Police aware is an expression we use. As the thread said, most people feel guilty and try to act normal around the police, which normally means pretending we're not there. So, for example, you begin to concentrate on eating that sandwich to an almost comic extent while sneaking the odd look to see what we're doing. Then you have the people who stop what they're doing and watch you intently to see if you're coming for them. These are the people who are police aware. Of course, sometimes they're just tourists hoping to take a sneaky photo of a British copper. Mostly it's people whose appearance or manner doesn't fit in. For example, if you go to a busy taxi rank at rush hour and then just casually mooch about rather than queuing or leaving, then that's an odd thing to do. If you walk into an expensive shop wearing tatty clothes and with ingrained dirt on your hands, then that's an odd thing to do. If you walk into a bar, order a drink, then leave it on the counter, then that's odd and probably means you're either passing counterfeit money or pickpocketing. None of these things is illegal, but they're all things that are not entirely normal and would attract the eye of an observant police officer. Don't misinterpret these examples as looking scruffy. That's not what I mean at all. It's about not fitting in because of your context, not just a sudden bout of "I'm normal" from someone who clearly has a reason to be where they are. Visible signs of drug use. Sometimes in the UK you'll hear the term heroin diet, but the same would be true for meth in the US. You can spot addicts from a mile away because they have the same look and behaviors. Without wishing to tar all addicts with the same brush, hard drug addiction and acquisitive crime often go hand in hand, so when I see someone who is clearly an addict, I'm immediately interested in them. Lastly, there's intelligence. A lot of what we do is guided by specific knowledge about an area. In some areas, I'll be looking out for teenage kids hanging around bike racks, and in others, I'll be looking out for drug addicts meeting dealers. In others still, I'll be looking for bag thieves amongst drinkers. Anyone who matches the sort of person I'm on the lookout for who also looks jumpy is going to pique my interest, but normal people, less so. Sorry, it's such a rambling answer. The truth is, there are many factors, and it just depends. Story 2. I got pulled over for speeding on Canada Day on my way up to Ottawa from Toronto. I did the usual routine of pulling over somewhere safe, taking the registration out, and putting both hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. So the cop approaches and I ask if it's okay for me to reach over and turn down the music, which I forgot to do. He starts laughing and says okay. He tells me to put my hands down since I'm making him nervous. I'm like, "You're making me nervous." And then back in Toronto, I don't take any chances and the cops are usually appreciative. But they have never told me to relax. It's best to err on the side of caution with Toronto police. But the out-of-city cops are usually pretty laid back. We had a good old Canadian laugh and wished each other a happy Canada Day, and then he gave me a ticket for 115 and a 100. Sigh. Edit. I was caught going 125 kilometers per hour in a 100 kilometer per hour zone. The cop reduced it to 115 kilometers per hour. Story 3. Cop here. I'll give a serious answer instead of all the others. Assuming this is on a traffic stop, for the most part, if you're acting jumpy, I try to figure out why and remove that stress. If I can't figure it out on my own, I'll just simply ask. Common answers are, I don't like cops, I don't want a ticket, and so on. My reasoning for this is if you're relaxed and I ask if there are any weapons in the car and your stress indicators skyrocket when you say no, something is wrong. If you're already stressed, I won't be able to see that reaction. As others have stated, it's not 100%. Some people are just nervous Nellies. I try to calm people down for their sanity and my safety, but it doesn't always work. Story 4. Police instructor here. You look for what is out of place or context. If everyone is looking at an event or a certain direction, that one person is staring at you or in the completely opposite direction, that's the oddball. People draw attention to themselves by behavior that is different from the environment or expected of the environment that they are in. And that's how they identified the Boston bombers. Everyone was looking in the direction of the explosion, but the brothers were staring in the opposite direction. Suspicious behavior. This technique can be applied to clothing as well. Like if it's summer and you see people wearing heavy jackets, there's something odd. Somebody keeps tapping their waistline and there's no reason for him to do that, like something falling off of it, and there's something tucked in their waistline, like drugs or weapons. Now, not saying that this gives you an excuse to go up and start harassing people, however, it definitely lets you narrow down the focus of your attention for what's out of place. Story 5. The funny thing is, if I'm off duty and around a uniformed officer I don't know, different department, area, etc., I get nervous. Hell, my heart sometimes skips a beat when I see one of our own cars driving down the road, even though it may be the same exact vehicle I was assigned to just a few hours ago. My point is, I think pretty much everyone gets nervous around a cop. Most people will avoid you and not make eye contact. But what really stands out for me are the adults that will periodically look at you, or you feel them staring at you like they're trying to ID your face. I've had to arrest a lot of people over the years, and many of them are back out on the streets. Story 6. Cops once woke me up at 3 a.m. in the morning because my neighbor saw flashlights in the woods next to my house. And then they started questioning me, asking me why I seemed so nervous, and if I wasn't doing anything, why were there footprints in the snow in front of my front door? I was a 19-year-old kid living on my own in a small town, so small it didn't have a population. I just remember being absolutely flabbergasted at why they would want to know why someone might be nervous about getting a visit from the cops in the middle of the night, and why they thought footprints in a heavily traveled area were suspicious. I basically told them some variation of that, and then told them they were welcome to look around outside if they wanted to before they left. This was during deer hunting season in Wisconsin, so the only thing I could think of is maybe they thought there was some poaching going on. Still, it showed a remarkable detachment from reality that they couldn't understand why I was so nervous to begin with. Story 7. Random story. So not long after I got my license, I was driving around and at a stoplight, there was a cop behind me. I hadn't done anything wrong. Cops at that point didn't freak me out yet, and even I knew a kid in school who was planning to become one. So the light turns green and I go. When I look behind, everyone is behind the cop in all lanes. It weirded me out. Usually there are cars passing me or next to me. People were giving the cop a nice wide berth, or at least not wanting to drive ahead of it. It made me feel paranoid, and I checked my speed. I was actually going slower than the speed limit. After I figured out everyone was just being paranoid, I sped up to the speed limit, and that was that. The cop was driving slower than the speed limit, and I drove off, leaving them all behind. I feel like the cop probably thought it was hilarious that his presence was slowing down traffic, because it wasn't like he was trying to control it. And since then, I've had plenty of speeding tickets. Plenty. But not on that day. Cops freak me out now too. Every time I see one, I go, oh speed limit? Okay. Car functioning right? Yes. Drugs in the car? Wait, I don't do drugs. It's a pretty tense situation. Story 8. I'm an ex-cop, still licensed, if that matters. You can't always tell. That is why treating everyone as close to the same as possible is important. The average person will change their behavior around a police officer at least a little bit. Can be a weird, over-respectful type of deal, or they may shut down completely. The average criminal acts nearly the same. However, that is why it's important to be very aware of the person's movements and responses to questions or your own movements. If you ask a person with drugs in the car, "Do you have drugs in the car?" his eyes will very commonly dart towards where he or she is hiding something, even if it is not drugs. That, of course, does not give me probable cause to tear the car apart looking for stuff. It's just a red flag. A person who is simply nervous and is not really guilty of a crime will most likely just break eye contact and look somewhere, such as out the window, behind you, down at the wheel, etc. The same goes for a person you may simply be suspicious of on the street. Are you carrying any weapons? Will lead to a person carrying a weapon too often, touching the area where it is, usually repeatedly, or start to look at where they have hidden a weapon. A person who is just nervous probably won't grab their waistband several times after that question. That is just one example, but it shows the importance of communication, being aware of the surroundings and subject, and why asking questions is very important. All because a person who is simply nervous and a criminal who is nervous are almost indistinguishable without some digging. As for people who appear totally 100% calm, well, that in and of itself can be a red flag as well. Maybe he or she is calm because they like police, or maybe they are police in a different area. Maybe they really do simply have nothing to hide and a good understanding of police procedures, or they are a hardened criminal that has no sense of remorse or anxiety over meeting a cop. You never know unless you start to look deeper. So to anyone who feels like cops hate you or are mean, maybe that sheds a bit of light on things. Story 9. Great question. I'm a cop in Arizona, and it's important to know the cultural and societal norms of your patrol area. A huge amount of folks here carry guns, for example. Your average law-abiding citizen will generally use a holster and not be deceptive about the weapon. Bad guys will not be forthcoming. We have some issues with Mexican drug cartels, and they tend to blend in somewhat, but have guns in unique calibers, such as a .38 Super. Since we do have a huge Hispanic community, it helps to know the norms for their behavior, which differs somewhat from the white community. The vast majority of the time, we will be dealing with people while investigating specific crimes. There's a huge variety of factors involved in that, but generally speaking, you are going to use four of your senses to make educated guesses: sight, smell, touch, sound. A person whose voice wavers may just be afraid of cops. Combine that with an odor of drugs or a suspicious protrusion on their body, then there could be an issue. While cultural knowledge is important, there are some universal signs of deception which you would probably recognize. I spent a year in Afghanistan doing police work as well, and those principles held true there too. To a degree, it's profiling, which is a dirty word, but a pragmatic principle. Story 10. Not a cop, but was almost arrested in my buddy's backyard. I was with three of my friends at a bar, and we were all getting pretty drunk and having a good time. My one buddy got too drunk, and he says he is heading home, where we all are staying that night, and that he will just leave the door unlocked for us to come in when we get back. Well, he ends up going to his dad's house instead of his mom's house, as we thought, and he isn't answering his phone. We are already in his mom's backyard and looking in his window trying to see if he is in his room. His mom wakes up and calls the police, and we still don't know anything is wrong. Cops come over, and we hear them in the alley, but think it's our buddy or his brother getting home, so we go up to the gate to ask them to let us into the house. A cop jumps over the fence and knees my buddy in the back and starts screaming at us to get the fuck on the ground. I was terrified and got on the ground, and all of us were so panicked that we started stuttering out, "Please, we know the people who live here, it's our buddy's mother's place," and start saying the full names of everyone who lived there. The cop responded to this by saying, "Bullshit, you guys are going to fucking jail, nobody lives here, it's an empty house." The cops then ask us if we have any weapons. Knives, guns, batons, hand grenades was the exact quote, I believe. At this point, we're all still so panicked and stressed, and I'm thinking that I'm going to jail and there won't be a chance to explain myself, and my buddies and I are just trying to assure the cop that we have no weapons and that we are good people. So we're just sputtering out our summer jobs, saying we aren't criminals and telling the cops we are in university and are good guys. Finally, the cops ask for our IDs, and I'm so scared of getting tasered or shot for reaching into my pockets. I must have announced what I was reaching for about 10 times before actually doing it really, really slowly. The cops check our IDs and we're all still lying on the ground. Then they turn to us and go, "Yeah, you all are going to jail for the night. Nice try." Then they get on the phone, and I guess they called my friend's mom saying it was safe to come outside and if she wanted to talk to them or see who was trying to break in. Thank God she chose to come outside because she knew us really well and recognized us all from closer up, even in the dark. So she walks out of the door and my buddy starts shouting, Miss Henderson, it's us, Charlie and Buddy." And we were saved from jail that night. The weird part was that before that, I actually thought that cops had some magical training to be able to tell when people were lying or good or bad. After that night, I realized it is just based on the situation and their best guess. Nothing we could have said or done would have changed that we were in someone else's backyard and that they had called the cops. It makes sense we were treated like criminals and potentially dangerous criminals too. The cops had no good reason why they should think of us as anything but. Story 11. Homicide detective here. Nervousness is not a sign of guilt, it's a sign of nervousness. Everyone responds to different situations differently, and some people get nervous around cops no matter how innocent or guilty they feel. I've watched other cops argue the point that a suspect must be guilty based on their nervous behavior, so I know some cops actually think that way. I think it's usually newer officers, stupid officers, or officers who have less experience dealing with people who think it's a good idea to link nervousness with guilt. I wish I knew a way to teach other cops that nervousness is a poor indicator of guilt and should never be included in forming suspicion. But every cop is an individual human being with human flaws and personal opinions. One of the shittiest things about this job is watching some cops just be bad at their job. Story 12. Always struggled with anxiety in social situations. Made meeting girls difficult. At age 26, I decided to try my hand at online dating. Bought a premium account on Cupid.com, met a girl who was amazing. We chatted online for 3 months before I worked up the nerve to meet her face to face. My family wished me luck as I headed out. On the way up to the interstate, there's a sign that says there's an ID stop 1 mile ahead. So I think to myself, no big deal, this is my exit. And I pull off onto the exit that is about 100 yards behind the sign. They were clearly expecting bad guys to pull off into that exit because ahead of me were 12 to 14 police cars, several of which were K9 units. I slow to a stop and I roll my window down. The officer asks for my ID and where I'm heading. I say, I'm actually heading out to meet a girl. And he replies, "Oh, really? Yeah, we've been talking on the internet for a few months and I'm finally going to meet her." The officer smiles and says, "I was wondering why you were so shaky when you handed me your ID." Another officer walks over to see what's going on. The first officer says, "Hey, this guy's about to go on a first date. He's nervous." The second officer jokingly says, "Well, if he's nervous, he may be hiding something." The first officer laughs, pats the door frame, hands me back my ID, and says, "You're gonna have fun. Good luck." The situation made a great icebreaker upon meeting my online crush. We enjoyed our evening and hit it off. That was 12 years ago, and we've been married for 10 of those. Story 13. Real cop here. Worked in Philly for 6 years in Kensington, and now I'm in the burbs living on Easy Street. When I was in Philly, you needed to learn people's ways. You would patrol the area multiple times, and you would notice that some people just never left. Also, you'll notice that these same people would be out regardless of the weather. Anyway, it took a while at first, but with time, you start to find out who's a dealer and who isn't. Drug dealers were annoying to get in Philly because they had a ton of lookouts blocks away, and they never kept the drugs on them. I remember we would drive early Sunday mornings the wrong way to get the jump on people. Stolen cars were a little easier. I probably got about 20 plus stolen vehicles in Philadelphia in the last 2 years I was there. People in stolen cars tend to give an "oh shit" look. Another dead giveaway is when you have a ton of young kids in a car. Seriously, it's a stolen car a ton of times in the hood. 2 weeks before I left, I was working solo and I saw 4 kids in a Sonata Park on the side. By the time I turned around, they were on the move. I caught up to the car and they quickly took off. Long story short, it was stolen. Some people were really good at getting guns. They were able to read people's stances and notice that they walked in a different manner when someone had a weapon on their waistband. I was never too good at that and only maybe got a dozen and a half guns while I worked in Philly. Now, working in the burbs, it's a lot less hectic. I get paid more and literally do about 1/20th of the amount of work. To me, it seems unfair, but whatever. I still enjoy my job, but if I had to pick where to work, I would pick Philly. It feels like real police work, but it is nice in the burbs that I can interact with the community more. Story 14. So a funny story that happened to me a couple of days ago. Driving my hour commute at 5 in the morning down a highway with a speed limit of 70. Barely anyone on the road. I'm in no rush, so I'm cruising along at like 72, 73 in the left lane. And then I look back and suddenly there's a car literally on my ass. Like he was so close, I couldn't see his headlights. And it's not like I drive a big car, just a normal size sedan. Normally, I'm not one to let people who do that by me, but hey, I was in a decent enough mood. I'll pull over for him and then just follow along behind him at whatever speed he's going. So I let him pass, and to my surprise, it was a cop. I'm like, okay, that's rude and dangerous and not becoming of a police officer. Whatever. I get back behind him and fiddle with the cruise control so that I'm following him maybe 5 to 6 car lengths. Matching his speed, we're going about 85. Continue along like this for 20 to 30 minutes. Suddenly, he guns it and then turns off all of his lights. My first reaction was, okay, why would he do that? But the second was, okay, crap, I can't see him anymore. Like, it's 5:30 in the morning and still pitch black. So I slow down back to 70 or so because I don't want to run into him or have him run into a different car and be part of the collateral. I don't know, it was just really dangerous, I thought. So after a couple of minutes, he turns his headlights back on, zooms back up to like 85, and starts riding my ass again. Now, I'm just royally confused and I put my turn signal on to move over. Then the flashing lights and pulls me over. I'm pissed now because I don't know how long he's going to take and I might be late for work. He comes and asks me why I was following him. I'm thinking to myself like, it's a highway, we're going straight. I go, I was just driving behind you. He goes, I had my cruise control at 85. Why were you keeping up with me? I just told him I was driving along with the speed of the car in front of me. Then he's like, I turned my lights off and slowed down to 60 and you slowed down too. Why? First, because I didn't want to pass the cop. That's just asking for it. But 2, because I couldn't see you and I didn't want to hit you. What you did was really dangerous. He gets all pissed and runs my shit and starts giving me a lecture that I have to slow down and all this bull. It pissed me off that he didn't see the hypocrisy. Unless they are on a call or have their lights on, cops have to follow the same laws as everyone else. No ticket, but I was this close to calling the dispatcher and filing a complaint for his speed.